Hi there. I still don't really have a good idea for an intro greeting, but maybe I'll come up with something that works eventually. But yes, welcome back to another video in this economy, I know, right? But yeah, this was another commission from earlier this year, back in June. I ran a little sale on everything pride and couples themed because it's one of my favorite things to draw, like couples and romantic stuff, believe it or not. And the commissioner had a very clear pose reference for these two here in mind, but actually wanted their positions switched. So this was kind of the main starting challenge for this piece. So I switched their positions, going by the reference, and then adjusted the poses a little bit however I saw fit. And for this, again, I started sketching in Procreate, but then switched over to Photoshop to refine everything. And for this drawing, I actually also remember to put a little secondary window in the corners so you can see the whole drawing, even when I'm extremely zoomed in on the details. I'm not sure if I kept it up the entire time, but for the most part, at least I think you should be able to see the full thing. And yeah, for this video, I'm also trying switching between sections that are a bit less sped up, like now, and others where I crank the speed up big time. So you can, on the one hand, see me working on the details a bit more clearer than breezing through the whole thing at 2000 times speed, but still not ending up with a like 2-hour long video. I think we're at about half an hour this time, that's okay. And maybe one day I will be able to draw this fast, but not today. So yeah, what I'm doing when I'm done with my draft and put it into Photoshop is usually refining my sketch a little bit. Because things like hand placements or hair details are very rough in the first draft. So I usually go over everything again, refine everything more or less, where and set in stone where stuff goes for the most part, and then use that refined sketch as my base for the line art. For example, yeah, really defining the curls here of one of the characters' hairs, like how the hair is really falling, because in the draft it's pretty rough. It's pretty rough out there. And then also here I'm placing another reference image of one of the characters' cyber hands on a separate layer, so that I can match the details as best as possible in this new pose, because he, like in the original picture, he had his hand a little bit differently, or it was less visible than here. And so I couldn't really trace it, and I didn't want to trace it in this case because the positioning and everything didn't really match anyway. So yeah, my challenge here was to actually understand a bit better why some details are the way they are, how the fingers work, in the sense how is this mechanical hand even constructed, and how will it interact with a human flesh hand, because they're holding hands here a little bit, so that's gonna be a little bit of a challenge later on when I do the line art. And I guess another advantage of not tracing the hand this time, but trying to really understand how everything works together is I can take some inspiration from that for designing some original cyberware somewhere down the line, maybe. But yeah, once I'm satisfied with my refined sketch, it's time to move on to the line art, which is probably one of my favorite things about the whole art process. Always was, still is. So yeah, I work with a very small brush here, at first with 100% opacity. It's not entirely rounded. It's like a little rounded triangle shape, kind of. I don't really know how to describe it, but it has a very nice feel for doing line art. I actually stole that idea somewhat from Matt Rhodes, who's like the main concept artist behind a lot of the Dragon Age games. Because I saw, like, ages ago, I saw an art video with him where he talked about his art process and whatnot, and I'm basically, for a large degree, I'm copying his style, more or less, or at least I copied that brush shape because I found it to be super, super nice for line art. And overall found that process very insightful, which is why I also like sharing my process here, because maybe someone else will find this insightful again. But yeah, I work with this very small hard brush, usually. I also have in Photoshop, I don't like the line stabilizing in Photoshop that much, so I have a separate tool, a little plugin, actually Lazy Nezumi, that helps a bit with that, but sometimes that is also a bit iffy, so it's usually something I have to adjust as I go if I feel like something isn't quite working out that well. But usually the way I do my line art, I go over everything a couple of times anyway, erasing and putting back in and erasing again, and going over certain parts to refine the line weight as well, to give everything a little bit more depth. My favorite thing to draw is still hair too. Like, I was very lucky that I have two characters here with two very distinct, different hairstyles. Because I like drawing long hair, short hair, curly hair, straight hair, all the hair, and beards. So, double bonus points that I have two characters with beards here too. So that was fun. But I also love drawing clothes. Actually, I can't think of anything that I don't like drawing about human anatomy. Like, cyberware obviously is a challenge, but I don't hate it anymore. So yeah, this is also why I just like drawing couple stuff, because it's two humans usually that are in some way different from each other, and it's just fun. It's relaxing. So yeah, for the hair, for the hand poses and everything, I try to stick to my refined draft as best as I can. I still have my original reference pics on my second screen open usually to reference them again as I go through everything. And what I also really love here is about how different these two characters are in style. Like Vico in front with the short hair is super fashionable and a little flamboyant, so I could really go wild with their style and makeup later on, as you'll see. And Joris, the one in the back with the cyber arm, is a bit more... simple isn't the right word, but he has a more subtle style, I guess. But even that doesn't have to be boring, and in fact it gives me the opportunity to hide some sneaky details here and there. And him being a little less colorful, a bit more toned down in comparison to Vico, also makes his cyber arm pop even more and be the star of the show. But yeah, figuring out the finger placement here was a real challenge. Again, it was part trying to understand how this mechanical hand even work, because in the reference his fingers are straight out. But for holding Vico's hand, they have to be somewhat further apart and bend so he can hold hands, and Vico's fingers match in there somehow. And this was something to figure out. I think on my second screen I was also researching some other cyber hands, like Johnny Silverhand's arm, to see how that looks when the hand is in a slightly different pose than just relaxed hanging down. And yeah, adding in some details here and there. Some made up, some from references, to kind of reflect how this would look with fingers bent forward like that. But the real struggle then, even like when I finally thought, okay, now I have this hand figured out, the real struggle was then the flesh hands again, or the flesh fingers. It just sounds so wrong, the flesh fingers. But like the organic is the right word, or the organic fingers. Yeah, I love drawing hands. I really do. But it's still and probably will always be one of the most challenging things to draw. I'm definitely getting better. The more I draw them, I can see that looking at some of my older stuff, 100%. But yeah, I'm still happy with the final result here. But yeah, it is a continuous learning curve that I think, and I guess to a degree, hope will never end. Because where's the fun in not having a little bit of a challenge, at least with a new drawing? But I had to revise everything a couple of times and took a break from the hands in between to do something else, because I was panicking a little bit about everything turning out wrong, maybe. But no, in the end I was content. Also, don't look at my layers, they're not named yet. At this stage of the drawing, there's not that many layers to begin with anyway, so I tend not to get lost in them. It's only when the colors come in that's when things get interesting, and when I have to start labeling everything to not lose track of anything. But yeah, at this stage it's mostly draft, refined sketch, and then maybe some iterations of line art, depending on how intricate it is and how many difficult details there are. So yeah, line art is almost done now though, and like I said earlier, I'm varying the line weight a little bit because it makes the whole drawing a bit more dynamic and lively feeling, to like when you have some variety in there, to not have all lines the same thickness. You can emphasize some details to be more in the foreground. Like it makes the main shapes more readable, if that makes sense. To have like some specific strands of hair or a nose or whatnot to have a slightly thicker outline than compared to tiny individual beard hairs. So those details stay a little bit more in the background compared to the main shapes. And like the end goal is to have somewhat of a good balance of detailed and less detailed elements in the overall composition. So for example, if Vigo was wearing an extremely detailed shirt with like fur and a gazillion buttons and sequins, the intricate details of Jorah's cyber arm would be completely lost, for example. And for that, it's also good to have like the little extra window in the corner where I have the full drawing is actually pretty useful during this stage of the drawing, because I can see where some details might still be a bit too vague and a bit not visible enough yet. And it helps me with figuring out where I might need to add a little more weight to the lines again. Oh my god, there is so many outtakes in this. Really struggling with my V's and W sounds today. Next video I'm gonna do with the very bad German accent. That's gonna be fun. No, I won't. I'm already cringing. But anyway, line art is done. And when I'm done with the line art, sometimes I send the commissioner another work in progress of this stage. I think I didn't this time, actually. And it will come to haunt me later. No. I think I didn't this time. It just went straight into colors because I work with this commissioner more or less regularly. They're a returning customer, which I'm so grateful for. Like, there's just, yeah, I don't know, I can't really put it into words. I feel very grateful to the people that keep coming back, because I think that, yeah, it's just a nice feeling to feel appreciated, or have your work be appreciated in that way, that people come back and more of it for their characters. So that's very nice. But yeah, colors. I work a lot with clipping masks when it comes to colors. But yeah, in my last video I mentioned wanting to dabble with affinity a bit more. Because it would be nice to have an alternative to Photoshop. But it's also really hard to find an alternative that I enjoy working with, because I'm so used to it, because I learned digital art mainly in Photoshop, and I'm super I'm super used to the way everything works together here. And in Affinity, clipping masks and masks in general work a bit differently than here in Photoshop, and I haven't really gotten the hang of it yet, how all of that plays together. I'm not sure if it even does. And yeah, that would be actually a big vote against it, sadly, because I just don't have the time currently to really learn a new tool, or rather, maybe I would have the time, but I don't have the frustration tolerance at the moment to learn a fully new tool, because I'm learning a lot of other stuff at the moment as well, and have a lot going on. So maybe I have to stick with Photoshop a little bit longer. But yeah, it sucks to be reliant on one tool. But I don't know, maybe when things ease down a little bit more in other areas of my life, I can dabble with Affinity a bit more and learn how the masks work there, and if I can adapt my process from Photoshop to that. Because like I said, it would be nice to have an alternative that might be better in some regards than the Adobe programs. But yeah, the way I color, apart from being extremely reliant on masks and clipping masks, is usually always in the same order. I start with the skin tones. I have a separate layer for hair, small face details like eyes, freckles, stuff like that. And then also clothing, all on separate layers. And I guess flat colors is a little bit misleading as a term, even though this is technically the flat color stage. But my colors aren't 100% flat, in the sense that every shape is just one color, like in a coloring book. I like to work with some light gradients, especially in hair. And I'm also adding a lot of little details to the skin to make it look more alive. Like, for example, some blush on the cheeks, or like adding some bluish under eye circles. Stuff like that. Just makes the skin feel more alive than just doing one basic skin color. And yeah, like, shading helps and has an influence too, like the light colors and everything, but I still don't like doing the base 100% flat. Everything, it depends a bit on the details. Like, for example, their shirts here are completely flat, one color, top to bottom, but sometimes when, like, there is for example, a piece of clothing that is a super special shiny material, I usually work with some gradients. Armor and stuff like that, I usually don't color in completely flat. And yeah, makeup. also is something I add in during this process. And this one was particularly fun to do. Like I said in the beginning, this was a Pride-themed commission, because this was during my Pride Month sale this year, and Vico is extra enough to absolutely rock the rainbow eyeshadow. I almost said rainbow eyebrows, but no, just eyeshadow this time. And yeah, as you see, Jarvis is a bit more monochrome in his fashion and in his makeup too, but he still gets a tiny little rainbow detail somewhere, a bit more sneakily. And yeah, at this point, it's really essential to name my layers, because otherwise I would get lost. And also, in the long run, if a client, for example, has a wish for adjusting something, having everything set up reversible like this with everything on separate layers makes adjustments later on super easy. Recently, I've also been reworking some older artworks of my own original character, where I changed his tattoos to a newer, updated version compared to what I did back then, like years ago. But since I've always kept everything set up like this, organized on separate layers, even 2 years later, finding those old tattoo layers is so much easier because I named them tattoos. So yeah, that's such a small thing, but it adds so much quality of life to the digital art process, and I think that's also one of the main perks and details about digital art that I love. How reversible and flexible it is. There's a lot less art regret than ruining a traditional painting at the final step. Of course, you can reverse things there too, but I feel like that takes a lot more effort, from my experience at least, but also I'm completely biased because digital art has been my main medium for like 15 years now, and yeah, a traditional artist might find my intricate layers setup stupid or unnecessary, because why not just paint over it on top? But yeah, I'm almost done with the base colors here, just adding in some final refining details. And as you probably guessed by now, this is not a painting, but more my cel-shaded illustrative style. So the next step after finishing the colors would be adding in the shadows as a first step. There is no concrete background for this piece. It was just a simple background, but the vibes were requested to be warm and fitting the summer mood of the Pride theme. So for the shadows, I worked with this coolish purple color to balance the warmer light that I'm adding in later. And all my base stuff, like the draft, the line art versions, the flat colors, are all stashed away into groups and a new folder now. And I'm of course adding all my shading on separate layers again too. Sometimes I start with the lights, but usually I just do the shadows first for no particular reason. It's just easier in my mind somehow. And again, working with a mask here, basically just masking off the light and shadow areas with my light sources in mind. Like for this piece, I wanted a main light source coming from the right side that is supposed to be bright and warm. But I also wanted a little rim or backlight that is somewhat complementary to the warm main light coming in from the left. So when I'm drawing in my or masking off my shadow areas, I have to keep in mind both these different light sources and add them in accordingly. And then once the shadows are done, that's really the main work of the drawing done. Like we're getting closer, because then it is a lot of copy and pasting and playing around with adjustment layers usually, as you'll see. Because usually when I'm done with the shadows, what I do is copying the shadow layer and inverting the mask. So I automatically then have a full color layer completely opposite to all the shadows that I just drew in, and can use that again as a base for my light colors. And here as well, just like with the base so far, I'm still working with the same brush that I also did the line art with, which is just my little rounded triangle shape. Sometimes during this stage, when I feel it's more like when I feel like it thing, not I always do this thing. Sometimes I also use airbrushes or airbrush-like brushes when I want somewhat softer lighting, or a combination of this hard line art brush with a softer brush. This is still my main tool for the absolute majority of the drawing. Like for the skin gradients and stuff, I used a softer brush here and there. And for the makeup, because that's easier and nicer to blend. Kind of just like how in real life you wouldn't apply eyeshadow with like a pencil. You would probably use a somewhat softer brush, so that's when in these instances I also use a softer brush for details like that. But yeah, when I'm done with my shadows, I add in my lights. And what I also usually do is add a layer of very subtle subsurface scattering. If you don't know what that means, let me know and I can make a video on that specifically, because we're still very sped up here. But it's basically this little border area between lights and shadows where they meet, and I usually go with like a light pinkish hue, and it looks really cursed here in this stage. But after some adjusting and blurring, it makes the skin just it just adds a certain glow and feel to the skin that makes it so much more alive than when I just kept my very harsh shadow lines. It's subtle, but I think it makes a big difference. And then yeah, that is pretty much it with the shading. Now the only thing that's missing is adding in some details, some highlights. Again, still mostly working with my line art brush, adding in little like for example on metal parts, or on shiny fabrics, or on shiny parts. Like the nose is usually a very shiny part of your skin. This is where I add little highlight details. And also occasionally switch to the more airbrushy vibes here for the final glowy layers. This is really hard to explain, I'm realizing. And if anything of that doesn't make sense, do let me know. Then I can explain it a little bit better, hopefully. But yeah, at this point I'm basically done. And here is what I teased earlier. It came back to haunt me. I didn't get Joris' nose quite right. So this was a little request by the client in the end when I showed them my final thing, is to make his changes or adjust his nose shape a little bit. But thanks to all my very appropriately named layers, it was easy to find the right line art layer and make the adjustments accordingly to the reference image. And then when I adjusted the line art, I adjusted the clipping mask of of his skin. I adjusted the skin details and I adjusted the shading. Didn't have to do that much here because there is mostly just the main light here, so I just had to get rid of some shadows I had added in. And yeah, that is basically it. That was the final little touch-ups. Then we have a final portrait. And like it seems like a simple thing, like two characters hugging each other. Like, what's special about that? But even simple, in quotation marks, portraits like that are always full of little challenges and learning opportunities, like almost every drawing. And I love that. I love that I'm still challenged by stuff now and then and manage to pull it off. I'm looking forward to the next one I can share with you. And until then, thank you so much for watching and have a good time.